Very good.
Perfect. So we'll put this up while we're waiting for people to come in. Todd, did you get the links for the rest of the program today?
You mean for the afternoon sessions?
Yeah, for the sessions after this one and the afternoon session.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, I never got those.
Let me see where they're at.
I wonder if I got dropped off the constant contact or something. Because I never saw the flyer until the other day either. One of my area directors sent it out and CC'd me on it, so I was able to get it that way. But
Yeah, I told Carol about that. She was under the assumption that it was sent out. So
I'm guessing it probably was. There was probably just a glitch in constant contact or however they sent it out.
I don't think so because I never got it either.
Oh, okay.
Let me see if I can find it for you.
I know my area director, at least one of my area directors, got the flyer.
It's a 1 minute warning.
All right, thank you.
And I'll email this to you after the meeting.
That would be perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And if it's just going to be the three of us, we can do this really informally.
One more person's joining.
Okay. Well, even four of us is easy to manage, so.
I'm going to wait 1 more minute.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll give people a chance to sign in, and then we'll get going.
And Jack, if you could enter your full name and the club, all clubs that you're representing in the chat, that way you can get credit for the meeting.
Okay, will do.
Meanwhile, we're going to start the meeting. It is 9:02. My name is Todd Rush. I'm the Distinguished Toastmaster, and I will be the Sergeant at Arms. For those people who wish to join us, please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Okay, it says that we're recording already. Did you click record?
I set it to record when I created the meeting link a couple weeks ago. So if we're recording, we're all set.
Okay. There's another person joining us. We'll wait until he comes in.
Sounds great.
Hi, Brad. If you can please put your full name and the club or any clubs that you're representing in the chat so you can get credit, I appreciate it. Did you hear me before, Brad? And Jack, I still don't have yours.
Yep, I'm working on it right now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Brad, if you could enter your name, full name, and the club that you're representing in the chat so you could get credit for the meeting, please. And I'm calling this training to order. Jason LeDuc has been in Toastmasters for 4 years and has served in positions of Vice President Membership, President, and Area Director. He is currently serving as a Division Director, Vice President Education, and Sergeant at Arms. Jason believes Toastmasters is an excellent way to help people become great leaders in their communities, workplaces, and their families. Our most important responsibility is to develop the future leaders who will someday take our place. Club officer training is a great opportunity to get members ready for their current position, as well as preparing them for future responsibilities. He is a strong believer in mentoring others to build the same focus on the future at the club level. This focus will help our clubs and members meet their goals while still having fun and social experiences along the way. Please help me welcome District 115 Division A Director, Jason LeDuc.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here today. It's great to have you. I really appreciate you coming out on a Saturday morning to spend some time with us. This is a really nice, manageable group, so we can kind of work through this as a discussion as opposed to me lecturing to the whole group. Let me share my slides real quick. Let me share my slides real quick, and we'll go through kind of the preliminaries here and then get into the discussion. So today we're going to be doing Sergeant at Arms training. I assume everyone here is currently a Sergeant at Arms in their club, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So welcome, we're going to be talking about that. Some of the things that we will be talking about today, there are 3 main objectives. We're going to talk about what the role of the Sergeant at Arms in the club is. We're going to be talking about the responsibilities that the Sergeant at Arms has, not just during club meetings, but before and outside of club meetings, and then some resources that are available to you as a Sergeant at Arms to help make your meetings smoother, help make your role smoother, and just generally make life easier and more fun for yourselves, your executive committee, your president, and your club. And basically that's just the same thing that we talked about on the picture slide with a different picture and some bullets. So let's get into what the role of the Sergeant at Arms is. And you've all been Sergeant at Arms for a couple of weeks now. Hopefully you've had a chance to be Sergeant at Arms at least one of your club meetings. What do you think the role of the Sergeant at Arms is, or what is your view of the role of the Sergeant at Arms?
I can have a stab, Jason. It's my understanding that the Sergeant at Arms prepares the meeting. It sets up, puts the podium out, gets there a little bit earlier than anybody else that's joining, and actually gets the room ready. I'm not quite sure how that all fits into Zoom, but I know I have done it one time, and I read the rules. I did the Pledge of Allegiance, and then the introductions, explained the roles to the guests, and then basically did a handoff, and then picked it up again at the end. So that's kind of where I fitted in so far.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts or ideas on the Sergeant at Arms role?
No, I think Damien kind of nailed most of it there. Make sure the meeting starts on time. In a normal situation, it would be preparing the room and everything that goes along with that, but it's a little different right now with the virtual meetings.
Okay. Erica, any thoughts?
I've been a Sergeant at Arms in actual club meetings, so yes, it's been my responsibility. So this is my 2nd term as Sergeant at Arms for my club, Desert Democrats. And I come in, get the podium together, put the flag up, make sure everything's set up. When they're speakers, if there's anything they need, like special slides or need something set up because they have a video to show or anything like that, I usually do all of those things for them as well.
Okay, great.
And at the end, put everything away and open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, and also let everybody know where the restrooms are at, if there's anything they need, you know, where everything is at, especially for our guests that come, and close the meeting at the end as well. It's been a little weird with the Zoom calls, but pretty much we do the Pledge of Allegiance, or I'll lead the Pledge of Allegiance during the Zoom call. And, you know, I always joke and say, you all know where your restrooms are at. But I ask people to, you know, mute for the Zoom calls. I do ask that when the speaker is speaking that everybody stays muted so that there's like no background noise or anything like that. So I've kind of added that to my introduction as well.
Great. Todd, you've been a Sergeant at Arms before too. Do you have any thoughts to add to this?
Well, the Sergeant at Arms actually is a logistic manager for the club. It goes beyond just the meeting. It also goes in finding different resources for the club itself. The Sergeant at Arms in the role for virtual meetings is the person who should be the host or co-host of the meeting. He should allow people in from the waiting room. He should recognize people. He should introduce them as they come in. The roles for the Sergeant at Arms in a virtual meeting has not really been that well delineated, And I think being the sergeant at arms and the logistic manager for the district, we're going to make up a list of responsibilities for the sergeant at arms and pass it out because it is kind of vague. But the sergeant at arms is in charge of everything that the meeting needs from A to Z.
That is a great point that I wanted to make sure that we made today. This is my first time as a sergeant at arms, so I've only done maybe 2 or 3 meetings as a sergeant at arms. But I was a club president a couple of years ago, and I relied very heavily on my sergeant at arms. And my philosophy on the sergeant at arms then, and it still is now as a sergeant at arms, is the sergeant at arms is responsible for the smooth movement of people and resources during the meeting. And so that comes with all that preparation that's set up before the meeting, making sure you know what the speakers need, the Toastmaster of the day needs, but it's also about the movement of the people as well as those things like the screen and the computer and the projector. It's really about making sure that everyone who comes to the meeting has a great experience at the meeting, as much, if not more so, than the Toastmaster of the day and the president. And your presidents are going to rely on you very heavily to make sure that that experience is smooth and seamless and fun, especially for guests coming in. And we'll talk about meeting roles or things that happen during the meeting, and we'll get into that into a little more detail of what happens during the meeting. But from a philosophical perspective, that's the way I view the sergeant at arms role, is making sure that everything moves smoothly, whether it's getting to the meeting, outside the meeting room, inside the meeting room, and then leaving the meeting. So that's kind of the philosophical place I come from. Just like Todd said, it's a logistics manager. And in addition to managing the logistics, it's making sure that everybody has a good time. And basically being a good host. The sergeant at arms is very often the first impression that a club makes on a guest. And so we want to make sure that we, as sergeant at arms, we're thinking about the impression that we're making and how we're making the impression of our club and creating a great experience both for members and for guests throughout the meeting. So to go back to the slides, so we'll talk about what we need to do with the club meeting. Let me page through my slides here. So we'll talk about the club meeting, we'll talk about what happens outside the club meeting, and we'll talk about your role on the executive committee. So let me jump into, should have done this the other way. So let's talk about what happens before the club meetings. So when you are getting your meetings ready, tell me what happens tell me what happens for your meetings when you show up as sergeant at arms. And I think we've talked about this already, but what are the things you think about before you even walk into the meeting room as a sergeant at arms? Or let's put it in a more current context. Before you start your Zoom meeting for your club, what are the things you're thinking about?
Who's speaking? If we're having any guests. And I always try and log in a little bit earlier in case somebody, see if we have enough people to fill all the roles and kind of, look at the agenda and see what's going on. And make sure that that's good on the Zoom calls. Pretty much, I pay close attention to the agenda and who's doing what and who's speaking.
I think that's really important to pay close attention to the agenda, and it doesn't hurt to get started on that a couple days ahead of time with the Toastmaster of the day. We have a saying in my home club of it all comes together at 6:30 p.m. on a Monday, but it really is a whole lot nicer if all the roles are defined Friday or Thursday previous, right? So,
If I may add something, Jason,
oh yeah, absolutely.
the sergeant at arms, as said, goes to the people who are speaking and people who have roles in the meeting. Also, the sergeant at arms will check everybody's video and audio, especially for the people who are presenting. So like Jason and I did today, I asked Jason to raise his camera a little bit because his head was being cut off. And that way he had a full view of him. Otherwise you would have been watching him without the top of his head. And also I checked the audio to make sure that the audio was good and clear so that he could be understood. These are part of the word that I use a lot, logistics of a meeting. And it's very important because if the speaker isn't seen or heard, then it's defeating the purpose. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Todd. Another great example of that is we had to work through being able to share the screen. I had switched the host from me to you, but then I hadn't left, before I turned over the host, I hadn't allowed participants to share screen. So these are the little things that setting them up prior, and even if you can get your speakers and your president and your Toastmaster today to log in a little early, to check that video, to check that audio, to make sure that they're able to share their screens. These are the little things that will make the meeting run much more smoothly, will make it much lighter and easier on your members to participate in the meeting and to watch what's going on in the meeting and really impress your guests. So that's before the meeting. How do you guys approach as members and guests are entering the meeting?
I'm definitely, no, I'm sorry, go ahead, Brad.
I would say that one of our main goals is to greet any guest. So basically you see a face that you don't recognize, you come up and introduce yourself and ask them a little bit about themselves, just make sure they feel welcome.
That's great. Did you have something, Damien?
Yeah, sure. So Brad touched on it too. Definitely introduce yourself to the guests. And then what I like to do, or I think is appropriate, is try and gauge the comfort level of the guests too, because some of them are a little nervous. I know I joined Toastmasters because I had a fear of speaking, and Toastmasters has really helped. But on day one, that fear was definitely there, and I wasn't comfortable speaking. So I check with the guests and just ask them, do you want to be called upon, or do you absolutely not? Because I don't want to put anybody on the spot that's feeling uncomfortable. And just make sure that the people that want to speak get a chance to speak, and the people that just want to observe get a chance to observe.
That's really great, and that gets lost sometimes in the shuffle of trying to get a meeting going. That last 5 to 10 minutes before a meeting is a really busy time for the sergeant at arms and the other club officers. It's not so much a factor when we're doing Zoom meetings, but when we were doing in-person meetings, and when we go back to in-person meetings, one of the things I liked the sergeant at arms at our club to do was to meet that person, get them to sign in, because you're helping out your VP of membership with that, to make sure you collect their contact information. But then after that initial greeting and maybe a little bit of a minute or two of conversation, handing them off to another member, introducing them to a couple of other members so that they can converse with a few other members before the meeting starts, making sure they're sat down next to another member so they have someone that they feel a little comfortable with before the meeting even starts. Because as sergeant at arms, you've got responsibilities before that meeting starts. You've got responsibilities when that meeting starts. So I always found it to be a really good practice to connect with them, make that first impression, make them feel warm and welcome, and then hand them off to another member who can also make them feel warm and welcome again prior to the meeting, and can have a little conversation, get them oriented a little bit, while you can focus on the next guest walking in the door.
If I may add, Jason, the sergeant at arms also is responsible for finding out if there's any props or necessary assistance that the speaker has, especially when we're doing a face-to-face meeting versus a virtual. And you want to make sure that they get the things set up before their speech so that they could have a positive experience.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And as the Sergeant at Arms, don't be afraid to enlist the help of some of your other members who have shown up early. If a speaker or one of your club officers is giving a presentation, they need to get props set out on a table or get a screen set up or whatever it might be, an audio check. Have you go ahead and enlist some of your other members to help out with that while you oversee and supervise what's going on. Remember, our job as Sergeant at Arms is to make sure it gets done, make sure it runs smoothly. It's perfectly okay for us to delegate that to someone else if we have multiple things going on so that we don't have to divide our attention over those multiple things. So that's, any other thoughts on prior to the meeting? All right, well, let's get into it. We start the meeting. This is our show as Sergeant at Arms. How do we get the meeting started? What are the things we do?
So quickly go through the rules of the club. I was just issued a new set of rules by my club that are specific to Zoom, which is something that Todd touched on, making sure the cameras are set, making sure the audio's good, giving the rules out, telling people go on mute if you're not speaking, if you're going to move around, shut your video off, let everybody know not to do anything while the speakers are actually speaking. Then move through to the Pledge of Allegiance. Before we had everybody's mics on, and trying to do the Pledge of Allegiance with everybody speaking at the same time on Zoom was a little rough. Everybody was kind of out of sync. So now we've gone to just the Sergeant at Arms speaking and everybody muting there. Then introducing to the Toastmaster, or the President, I think is next. And then kind of taking a back seat from there and letting the meeting flow, and only stepping in when needed. I think at that point it's important to take more of a back seat and let the other roles do their thing.
Absolutely, right. At some point as Sergeant at Arms, we go from being on center stage to being more of a stage manager and making sure that meeting runs smoothly for the President, for the Toastmaster of the day, for the speakers, for anything that needs to happen. Again, movement of people and resources into, during, and out of the meeting to make sure it all runs smoothly. Going on to Zoom, we've gotten some really hard-fought and won lessons on Zoom, and I think it's great that your club has a list of rules, and I know Todd has a list that he uses of rules for a great online meeting. Everyone mute your audio if you're not speaking. So, mute your audio when we're doing the pledge, so on down the line. That's not something we currently have in my club, but that's something I do want to put together to read at the beginning of every meeting of, please observe these rules to make it a much smoother and more pleasant meeting for all of us. So I think you hit the opening really well, and then that transition to being off stage and then supporting what's going on stage for the remainder of the meeting.
Jason, if I may, if you want a copy of we have 10 steps that we read. If you want a copy of them, put your email in the chat box and I'll send it to you after the meeting. And you could then just put your club name in it where we use our name.
Yeah, Todd's list is really great. I think you used that at TLI a couple of weeks ago, and it was a really great list. I'm just going through my notes here, and a couple of things that I want to cover, make sure that we don't miss before the club meetings. The training says confirm the room reservation. Always a good idea when we're doing in-person meetings when we get back to that. But different clubs are doing it different ways, where someone is setting up the Zoom link who's not necessarily the Sergeant at Arms, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be you setting up the Zoom link, as long as that Zoom link is set up and out to all of the members so they know where to connect, when to connect, etc.
Jason, I have a quick question.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Is the Sergeant at Arms responsible for securing the room? I know we've been using a conference room at the top of a car dealership, and they've told us that they're no longer going to be opening that, even if the restrictions are lifted. They're going to keep that conference room closed. So we're actually in the process of finding a new location when things open back up. Is that the Sergeant at Arms' responsibility to engage in that?
So it's the Sergeant at Arms, we're going to go through the training, and the training is going to say it's the Sergeant at Arms' responsibility to secure that room, to secure that location. The way I look at this is a club is a team, right? You've got an executive committee and you've got all your members. Your members may be able to find something and be able to do that legwork for you. When it comes down to it as a Sergeant at Arms, the most important thing is to make sure you have a meeting location for your next meeting, ideally the same location out into the future. But you don't necessarily have to be the one doing all the calling, all the deal making, all the negotiating to find that room space. It's perfectly okay to work with the rest of your team and your club to do that, but you've got to be on top of it as a Sergeant at Arms. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It does. Because the reason I asked that question is because I'm sure there are rental fees, and the Sergeant at Arms doesn't touch the club funds, I'm sure. So it would be teamwork and a negotiation between the people that do. Sure.
Absolutely. So, you know, if there are funds involved, you'll need to work with your treasurer. And, you know, again, finding a location it can be a great team effort for your club.
Got it. Thank you for that.
The only other thing prior to the meeting, it talks about making sure there are supplies. So back when we were meeting in person, we had a box of all the forms, the job aids for the yacht counter and the timer and that kind of stuff. So as Sergeant at Arms, once we get back to in-person meetings, those job aids and forms are all there. You might use the Toastmasters ones. Your club might have their own. Just making sure that there's plenty of forms and supplies and everything you need to run a meeting before the meeting starts, so that you're not running off to try to make copies or training a new person on how to do the counter role in an effective way. Let's see. Upon arrival, I think arrange the room, arrange the tables and chairs, set up the meeting materials and promotional materials. So this is when if you have Toastmasters magazines, if you have welcome packets. Another thing to make sure you've got 4 or 5 of for every meeting, before every meeting. If your VP of membership and your VP of PR have put together really great welcome packets, make sure that you've got them and make sure that every guest gets a welcome packet, gets a guest packet. Regardless, you know, that's up to your VPM and, you know, your executive committee about what you put into those welcome packets, but making sure you've got them to hand out when those guests come in. Let's see, upon arrival at club meetings, check the room temperature. That's one, they put this in the training for a reason. That one really often gets overlooked. And if you've ever tried to do a meeting, whether it's for Toastmasters or anything else in a room that's a few degrees too hot or a few degrees too cold, it can be really distracting. So something to check. Another reason to get there early is if you need to get the AC on or the heat on, at least you'll have 15 minutes or so for it to start to come down to temperature or up to temperature. And don't forget to ask the guest to sign the guest book. So important for your VPM, your VPPR, anybody who's going to follow up with your guests and try to get them to come back to a next meeting and convert them to members in the future. So important to get the guests their name and their contact info. Welcoming arrivals, coordinating food service if you have any. If you're voting, collecting ballots. This isn't something we do very often in our clubs, basically once a year when we have elections, and a lot of times we do that as a SurveyMonkey survey. So we haven't had a lot of that, but if you're using the informal ballots and notes forms, we'll talk about those in a little bit, but there's Toastmasters has a form where you can list out feedback for, each member can list out short pieces of feedback for the speakers and the evaluators, and it's even a ballot to vote on the best table topic speaker of the night. So that's a form out there. I forget the number, but we'll get to that in the training. But if that's something, if you are passing things out or collecting things, that's the job of the Sergeant at Arms to make sure those are either out at all of the seats before the meeting or that they get passed out and collected appropriately. So we talked about before the meeting. We talked about what goes on during the meeting. Let's talk about wrapping up the meeting. what do we need to do as Sergeant at Arms to wrap up the meeting and close it out?
So what I've done is actually prepare for the next meeting is the last step that I like to take. Actually making sure the roles are filled. Before Zoom, we had a clipboard that we passed around the room, try and find out who was going to speak, if we could get people to volunteer for our counters and table topics and all the other smaller roles. We try and get those filled that night so we're not chasing people down over the next. We meet every 2 weeks, so over the next 2 weeks, and try and get a head start on the next meeting before we actually close it out.
Okay, that's great. Always good to work with your VPE and work as a team to make sure those roles get filled for next time, so you're not trying to pull it all together 5 minutes before the meeting. What else?
I'm actually the last person to leave the room, so I make sure everything's put away. Everything that I brought in, I take it on down, make sure it's all put away and stored, because we meet at the county building in a conference room.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a space where we store our box of supplies and the flag and all of those things. So I'm the last person to turn the lights out, make sure that's put away and stored, and that everything's the way that it was when we got there.
Yeah, I think that's great. Be the first person there, be the last person out as a general rule. If you can't do that, ask someone else to help you out. Take out the trash if that's part of your responsibilities. Put the room back in whatever configuration it was. Basically the whole idea, leave it better than you found it, right? So that's really what it comes down to. So wrapping up the meeting, get ready for the next meeting, anything you need to take care of, and then leave the room better than you found it. And let the members go off and talk about how great the meeting was and network and socialize and that kind of thing. And again, if you need some help, don't be afraid to enlist some of the members in your club to help you put tables back, put chairs back, put the screens away, put the flags away. You don't have to do this all yourself. You're just responsible for making sure it gets done. So that's what we do before a meeting, during a meeting, and after a meeting. What are our responsibilities outside of the club meeting? Let me share my screen again and get us caught up on the slides. Oh, no, that's not what I want. Okay, so that's before, upon arrival, during, after, outside the club meetings. So as we talked about, our responsibility as Sergeant at Arms is to schedule those meeting locations. We don't have to do all this all by ourselves. We can use the rest of our team to help us out doing that. Ensure additional supplies are available. So if we used a bunch of worksheets or whatever it is we use, make sure that we refill our box with the things that we need to fill them with, and attend the executive committee meetings. And I think that's probably what we'll spend the rest of our time on. If you can't be there, make sure you delegate someone to take your place and to fill the role. Do a little training with them if they need it. Because as we said, there's what the club sees the Sergeant at Arms do, and then there's all the behind the scenes stuff that the Sergeant at Arms does. So that might require a little training. And then one of the most important things we can do is start to look for our successor before June comes along. Find someone who might be interested in the position or be really good at the position, and start grooming them to take over when it comes time to elect new club officers. So something to start thinking about in the back of your mind throughout the year of who'd be a great replacement for me as we go through the year, and then get them to take over the role next year. So let's talk about the executive committee meeting, or the executive committee. So what's our role on the executive committee? And I'll leave these up so you guys can see, but have you guys done an officers meeting yet? Have you had an executive committee meeting yet?
I have not. I'm going to take a back seat and really try and learn something here because I'm a little clueless on this.
Yeah, I'm not sure we've had one either. Yeah, I'm not sure we've had one.
Yeah, it's a little early in the year. I know in 2 of my clubs, we're having them next week. So the important thing to know about the executive committee is this is where all the officers of the club get together and they talk about the strategic direction for the club, who's going to handle what things, roles and responsibilities. We have predefined roles and responsibilities based on our position as sergeant at arms in the club. And that's what's on some of this slide, right? Work to coordinate meeting spaces, chairing the social and reception committees, if you have those committees, replacing forms. Basically, as sergeant at arms, just like for a regular Toastmasters meeting where there's speeches and business for all the members, at the executive committee, your job is to be sergeant at arms for that. So working with the president to make sure that you help the president work through their agenda for the executive committee meeting and it runs smoothly and that everybody has everything they need for that meeting. So it goes through. Have any of you, in any of your previous officer positions in a club, been part of a club success plan?
I have, Jason.
Todd, do you want to tell us a little bit about a club success plan and what you did as sergeant at arms?
A club success plan, or a CSP, is when the executive committee gets together and they look at the direction of the club. And I'm just going to be very brief on it because it's a long process. And you sit down and you look at members and you see which member might want to make complete a pathway, or which member wants to excel in a certain path. And you put that down on a club success plan sheet, and that is your kind of like process, or your, not process, your agenda for the club throughout the next 6 months. It like I said, it's long, it's very detailed, but it helps you as executive committee know where you're going, and that then runs you into the DCP, which is the actual distinguished club plan, which tells you exactly how to make presidents select club.
Yeah, that's a great summary of it. The club success plan, it's a way for the executive committee to get together. It's a tool that Toastmasters created, and there's a lot of fill-in-the-blanks boxes on it for the club to set their goals and the executive committee to set their vision for the upcoming Toastmasters year. There's a lot of blocks to fill in for the president and the VPE and the VPM and even the VPPR about their different roles in the club and the goals that they have. But as Todd said, this is a great way for the VPE to look at the members and what educational goals each member might be able to achieve and set some goals and then some tactics on how they're going to follow through and do this. As a sergeant at arms, our job in the club success plan is to fill in the blanks of the logistics, that movement of people and resources, not just in the meetings, but outside of the meetings, to help the other officers achieve their goals in the club success plan. So if your club hasn't done a club success plan, or you've never seen a club success plan, I recommend getting on the Toastmasters website and just downloading a club success plan, the blank form, and just kind of flipping through it and seeing what are the kind of things in the club success plan. And that may be something, I'm sure that in the other training they're talking with this with your presidents and your VPEs about club success plans. But this is a great way to help your club set their goals and then turn those strategic goals into action for all of the club officers to help the members achieve those goals. So I won't spend a lot more time on that unless you guys have questions on the club success plan. But it's a great way for the executive committee to get together and figure out not just what the goals are, but how they're going to achieve them throughout the year, and then compare them to last year.
Jason, if I may, if you're doing a club success plan and nobody is comfortable in doing it, I'm sure if you contact your area director or division director, or even the program director for the district, they would come to your meeting and help you successfully fill that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to your area director. If you're in Division A, I've already talked to area directors about working with the clubs, helping the clubs set their goals and helping the clubs figure out ways to achieve their goals. But if your area director or your division director isn't able to do that, let me know, and I'll be happy to come sit down with you and your executive committee and just page through the club success plan and get you guys thinking along that. So we've got just a couple more things to step through here, and it's really mostly just about the resources that are available. So did I miss anything? Yeah, executive committee. So we've talked a lot about the how, why, what, when, who for what we need to do for our Sergeant at Arms responsibilities. Some questions to think about. Whether you're doing this as part of a club success plan or just thinking about the upcoming year and how you're going to help your president and your VPs achieve their vision and the goals for the club. How will you fulfill your responsibilities? When will each action be completed? Who's available to help you? Like I've said a couple of times, you don't need to do this alone. Enlist help when you need it, because you've got to have your attention on a lot of different things, especially in those first few minutes before a meeting and the first few minutes of the meeting. Get help. Don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. And then what materials and resources can you use? So there's a couple resources out there for you. Well, you're here at Club Officer Training. That's the first one. Thank you so much for coming. And this is the first one, and I hope we provided something valuable for you today. There's materials out there. You should have gotten from your club presidents a Club Officer Leadership Guide. If you haven't, that's out on the Toastmasters website. I believe there's also a Sergeant at Arms manual on the Toastmasters website. So there's lots of different resources that can tell you a lot more about the details of the job and give you some ideas on how to go achieve your goals and your responsibilities as a Sergeant at Arms. One of the great things that clubs can do is having the incoming executive committee meet with the outgoing executive committee. And if that doesn't happen, you can always meet with the outgoing Sergeant at Arms and just find out what did they learn throughout the year, what do they wish maybe they got started earlier on, what were things, if they could do it all over again, would they do differently? So meeting with the outgoing Sergeant at Arms is always a good idea. Getting together with your current executive committee, understanding what the president's vision for your club is, what the president's goals are, what the VP's goals are for your club, and understanding how you can support them with those. Introducing yourself to the meeting space contacts. So we talked about in Damien's case, their meeting space they're not going to be getting back, but if your Sergeant at Arms is changing over, it's a good idea to go connect with the meeting space people just so they can put a face with the name of the person that they're in touch with for the club. And asking for volunteers to assist you. We've talked about that a couple of times. Some additional resources out there for you. I think these are some of the manuals that we talked about. And that item I talked about, those ballots and best evaluation forms, that item 163 on Toastmasters website. Like I said, I saw those at a club when I was area director. One of my clubs started using those, and I thought that was really kind of a fun way to foster a little competition in the club and let people besides the main evaluators give some feedback to the other speakers. So that's a really interesting tool that you might be interested in your club using, something to talk about at your executive committee meeting. And that's really all I had. I think we covered everything that Toastmasters wants us to cover. And I think we have covered a lot of other stuff that I hope is helpful to you. Before we wrap it up, because we're getting close to time, I think we're supposed to wrap up at 9:50. Do you have any questions, or do you have anything that you want to share about how you're doing the Sergeant at Arms jobs that we can all benefit from?
I guess just one question from the more experienced Sergeant at Arms. If you could give one tip or one piece of advice, what would it be to a new Sergeant at Arms?
Well, Damien, the biggest thing that I look to do is to find somebody to assist me, because you can't do all of it by yourself. It's virtually impossible. The virtual meeting is a little different, but when you go back to face-to-face meetings, you're going to have to go back to the old setting up the banner, making sure the flag's there, arranging the chairs in the room, getting to speak to the speakers, making sure they have all the props they need. And it gets a little overwhelming, especially if you have a large meeting. So enlist somebody to assist you. And that way also, when you're not there, they could help take over the meeting.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Todd. I actually just found the Sergeant at Arms manual on the website, the Toastmasters website. I'd be happy to put a link to it in the chat if anyone would like it.
That'd be super helpful. Thank you.
You got it. I'm doing it right now.
Erica, you've been a Sergeant at Arms before. Do you have anything to add?
Well, I don't know. I think we've been very thorough. That was a very good tip because, but I never have to look for someone. Our club, everybody's, at the end, everybody's picking up something, helping me put it away. Most times people will be helpful when they see you putting things away or bringing things out if someone is there. But that was really, really a good tip when we get back to meeting. I don't know. I just try and stay, ahead of things, and I try to see if anyone needs anything, be as helpful as possible.
I think that's great. And I think the one thing that I would add is remember that as Sergeant at Arms, you are very often the first person, the first impression. Okay, just a second. My dog is so loud. You're very often the first person and the first impression that the club makes on a guest. Stop it. I'll let you out. All right, pull out. You're very so you're that first impression. So whether that's an experienced Toastmaster or your area director, your division director, one of the district leadership coming to visit, or a brand new guest who's a little nervous about coming to Toastmasters and they're looking for some help with their communication and their speaking, you're their first impression, whether it's when they come in to get greeted or when you first stand up in front of the meeting. So don't forget that that's one of the most important things about your role, and try not to get caught in the weeds of getting the meeting set up, and ask for that help so that the meeting can get set up and run smoothly, but you can still make sure that guests are greeted warmly, they're made to feel welcome, while all the other logistics, the movement of people and resources is happening under your watchful eye.
Yes, I think that's great.
So thank you, great stuff. I think we are right on time. Are there any last questions, or Todd, do you have anything to add before we wrap it up?
Thank you, Jason. I just want to make sure that everybody put their full name and the club that they're representing in the chat box. Also, if you want the list of the 10 Zoom meeting protocols, put your email in there, and I'll make sure you get that also. Anything, Jason, your presentation was fantastic. You pretty much covered everything that the Sergeant at Arms does. I think you set everybody up for a very successful year in leadership, and I appreciate your knowledge and your expertise. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Todd. I appreciate the chance to talk to you all today. Like I said, this is my first go at Sergeant at Arms as well. So I'm learning as we go. So, but I hope what we did today was helpful for you. If you have any questions ever, feel free to reach out to me. You'll find me on the district leadership list. I'm the Division A director. So please feel free to reach out anytime. Thank you for coming today. I will, Todd, do we need to do anything special to end the meeting?
I'm getting